Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the discussion of post-structuralism. Today in this video, we're going to talk about Jacques Derrida. Derrida was an Algerian-born French philosopher best known for developing a form of semiotic analysis known as deconstruction, which he analyzed in numerous texts and developed in the context of phenomenology. He is one of the major figures associated with the post-structuralism and postmodern philosophy. When we look at Derrida's deconstruction, often associated with the movement, which is what is called as deconstruction, he is arguably one of the most elusive, controversial, and influential figures in the Western intellectual history. His work has spanned philosophy, literature, the law, political theory, and social theory as well. Obsessed with the functioning of language, Derrida's mode of writing is playful, elliptical, and sometimes obscure. However, the point is that the way he makes his arguments is the argument itself, a degree of self reflexivity that is not seen in contemporary writing. Derrida's early work built upon the Saussurean notions of language and significations, but later he took them to the radical extremes. Derrida argued that if the relation between signifier and signified is arbitrary, as the structuralists say, especially Saussure, and all language is rational, then the process of reading is a movement from one signifier to another signifier. We can never come to the end of signification and discover the meaning because when we get to the end, we are faced not with the signified but with yet another signifier. Every signifier refers to other words or signifiers in an endless postponement, which he calls as difference, Defrence, of meaning. We never arrive, we only travel along with the paths of the meaning from one meaning to another. So we travel along the path of meaning making. Thus, in order to explain the word cat, we use further terms like animal, organism, whiskers, tail, and so on and so forth. More signifiers along the chain of signification. There is no final signified because even what um, we have finalized as signified will also consist of more words or the signifiers. Interesting, isn't it? So we don't have it at all, and it is made up of postponement of meaning. Every signified fire, argued Derrida, is made up of an absence. Building on Saussure's assumption that meaning is the result of Difference, say for example, a cat is different from bat, from hat, from fat. This is what we studied in structuralism. Derrida suggests that every word carries within it the words that we are aware of as being different. Every signifier is a series of differences from other signifiers. All of those are the absence that constitute this one for us. Cat is produced because fat, hat, bat are absent. But these absences are crucial because without them, we cannot understand what cat is. This means the meaning of cat is the result of absence rather than mere presence of difference. Meaning, ironically, depends as much on the absence of other words as on the presence of cat. Derrida's chief contribution has been to show how language is fundamentally slippery, based on self contradictory, unfinalizable conditions of difference and difference. Difference, difference, and difference. His arguments have focused on the need to pay closer attention to the way in which meanings are produced temporarily rather than with any finality through contradictions and ambivalence, and have consistently rebelled against any authoritative meaning. What Derrida achieved with these twin moves of Meaning as based on difference, difference, and the absent presences, and as perpetually deferred, defferred, was a radical rethinking of the very process of language use. Writing and language, he announces, with a difference, difference, a term that combines difference and deference. Difference. We shall return to the significance of this term later. All writing, according to Derrida, is difference, difference, which is a study of difference and maybe deference, postponement. This is what Derrida famously termed as grammatology. Derrida's deconstructive turn must be read alongside with the buts. What these two thinkers did was to provide a very significant shift in the way we think of language. Both suggested the endless play in language and literary works, the unreliability of any meaning from any work, the openness of the texts, the instability of language, the unfinalizability of any meaning or text, the relationships between words, meanings, and texts as intrinsic to meanings rather than the words themselves. Deconstructive criticism would build on these themes of unfinalizability, difference, rationality to show how a text can subvert its own stated philosophical or literary assumptions because it refers to and is open to three important things. Number one, a different reading. Number two, another text that rather than reinforce its argument might subvert it. Number three, revisions, even as it states its meaning in unambiguous terms. These three are very important to have a deconstructive criticism of Jacques Derrida. So, Derrida's deconstruction, if we seek a simple methodology in its practice, is thus interested in how texts break down, defeat their stated aims and purposes, rely on false or unsustainable oppositions, make use of figurative, rather literary or metaphoric language, even when trying to be empirical, reverse their own arguments, depend on other texts and signs, conceal arguments that are the very opposite of what they ostensibly show. If structuralism was interested in how meaning is produced and texts work, deconstruction is interested in the contradictions that resist meaning, in how texts do not work but deconstruct themselves. Interesting, isn't it? So, Jacques Derrida presents what is called as text, textuality, and writing. Let us understand what he means by text, textuality, and writing. Deconstruction's attention to the language of texts has often led to the accusations of it being another version of new criticism. Its playfulness and puns have sometimes been seen as frivolous. Both these charges, however, miss the point. No critical analysis of texts and literary language has been as rigorous as deconstruction in Jacques Derrida, Paul Dimon, Jeffrey Hartman, and Harold Bloom that we are going to do in the next video. Nicholas Ryle in 2000 proposes that one way of approaching the deconstruction is to see how it treats speech acts and language. A contrastive is an assertion and can be either true or false. A performative is a speech act that performs an act in the very act of saying. Thus, I swear, I confess is a performative because the words swear and confess perform the acts of swearing and confessing. Deconstruction shows how every constative, every assertion also includes a performative within it. Thus, there is no pure actually constatives, each being contaminated with another. Deconstruction's chief strategy has been this: to discover the impurities, contamination, border crossing that upset purity, structure, linearity, origins. In every statement, deconstruction argues one can see trace of elements of other sounds, statements, and truisms. In every statement, you can see the reminders of something else and detect what else remains to be said. What is even more important is Derrida's concept of logocentrism and phonocentrism. Deconstructive thinking in Derrida begins by worrying about the distinction posed in linguistics and culture between speech and writing. Derrida is reading Saussure and Claude Lévi-Strauss here. Speech is privileged because it is seen as more authentic since it happens only with a speaking person. Writing is treated as artificial and as suggesting death, loss, and unreliability since writing can exist independent of after the life of the writer as well. Thus, speech is taken to mean presence of the speaker and writing to mean absence. Yes or no? Writing is therefore about absences and thus less privileged in this schema. Derrida termed this privileging of speech over writing. Phonocentrism, as he calls it. Speech is privileged because it seems to have an essence, the speaker. Listeners assume the speaker embodies the truth of what is being said because the speaker is present in that. In fact, Derrida proposes notions of truth are dependent upon this idea of the center, which is called as logos, core, or essence. This is what he terms as logocentrism or the metaphysics of presence, where the core or the presence is seen being the truth. Derridian reconstruction first moves, therefore, to reject this emphasis on the centers and origins and essences. Phonocentrism is a term Derrida uses to describe the privileging of speech over writing in Western thought. A privileging based on the assumption that because speech implies a speaking presence, it is more authentic. Logocentrism is the term that Derrida uses to describe the assumption and quest for a core, an essence, truth, and center. Logos, or the final meaning, is believed to vest in God, whom Derrida terms a transcendental signified, a signified that explains and culminates the very process of signification. So it is very interesting that writing is seen as extra in addition to speech, something that is used as a sign when the presence of the speaker is not possible. This locates writing as extra, an appendum, and therefore subordinates to speech in the hierarchy of speech writing. Derrida terms this the logic of the supplement. Derrida's deconstruction also talks about the supplement and the difference. Note the difference, the spelling difference. Difference. The supplement actually is the difference. Derrida proposes following Saussure that signs cannot ever refer to these things themselves. Signs are therefore incomplete and require something else to complete its sense. Supplement is this necessary completion. It is a signifier that is extra. But Derrida argues that signifier is also what completes. It is extra and therefore unnecessary, but also necessary for completion of the meaning. It is both necessity and excess. Can you understand? It is both necessity and excess. It can substitute or supplant. The signifier is needed because it tells us that there is a presence that is not here and now, but presence. In other words, a sign is indicative of an absent presence because it shows something that is not here but makes us alert to the fact that something is not here. The supplement is the signifier. Derrida's deconstruction move is to show how we seek to go from supplement to the core, to the main meaning. One wishes to go back from the supplement to the source. One must recognize that there is a supplement at the source itself. This simply means we start a process that will never end. So we have sign after sign, supplement after supplement. And so Derrida uses the term writing to therefore include both spoken as well as written forms in order to emphasize that speech is a form of writing. This argument illustrates a basic feature of deconstructive method to analyze a hierarchy, to reverse it, and to show how the elements of hierarchy are constitutive of each other. Thus, speech and writing are not opposing terms or binaries, but rather each contains the other. The literary and cultural theory, Derrida's arguments about texts, have been particularly influential, and to these we shall now return. He says, very famous statement, there is nothing outside a text. Everything is there within the text. There is no outside text. Text requires a clearer explication in Derrida. Number one, text is not restricted by a book's margins and bindings. A text, number two, overruns, spills over its boundaries. The end of the book is not the end of the writing. Number three, every text carries traces of other texts. Remember intertextuality that Roland Barthes is trying to say? Number four, every text is therefore a network of other texts from which it differs. So there is no outside the text. Derrida says you have to read the text and try to find out what other signifiers could be there, and you could find the traces of them and thereby giving it some sort of meaning. There is no outside the text signifies that one never exceeds a text without some relation to its contextual opposition. We keep on moving, meaning after meaning. Derrida here proposes that history, politics, economics, reality itself is based upon this difference, where you will never have one meaning. This is the basic difference between post-structuralism and structuralism. Structuralism aims at looking at the text and deriving a particular meaning, one meaning based upon a center. Whereas post-structuralism of Roland Barthes or Derrida is indeterminacy of meanings. Agree with this? And so we move about to talk about the traces. The traces, the deconstruction does not have a place for language over here and a world over there to which it refers. There is no essential difference between language and the world, the one as subject, the other as object. All we have is traces, one signifier after another, one after another, one meaning after another. You can never have a complete meaning, and that is it for any text. You have traces. So texts are always undecidables. Later critics have theorized about textuality as being different from the text. Textuality is what constitutes the text in particular ways. This involves interpretive texts, contexts, acts, and the knowledge produced through the text. Textuality is the process of reading the text with no clear cut meaning. A text is the object that is read. A textuality is the act of reading and interpreting. This reading reveals the slippages of language. And so, Derrida writes, the reading must always aim at a certain relationship, unperceived by the writer, between what he commands and what he does not command of the patterns of the language that he uses. This relationship is not a certain quantitative distribution of shadow and light, of weakness or of force, but a signifying structure that critical should produce. Textuality, the process of reading, is what constitutes the text, as Barthes says and as Derrida says. In fact, Barthes talks about work and text. Remember? But this process of reading is undecidable, infinite, and open because we are always bringing other textualities into our reading. And this means because textualities are open and undecidable, texts are also rendered to open and infinite. So we can never produce a particular meaning within deconstruction. Right? Here we stop with the analysis of deconstruction of Derrida. Both Roland Barthes and Derrida talk about indeterminacy of meaning through the structuralist reading of the text, thereby leading to post-structuralism. Thank you for being a part of this video. Wait for the next for discussing many more concepts of post-structuralism. Bye for now.